Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome. I'm Kate Markert. I'm Executive Director here at Hillwood Estate Museum and Gardens, and I think you all know what I'm going to say next, which is just make sure that you've turned off anything that rings or buzzes or barks or whatever. What a glorious day to be here. I hope you all got to get out into the gardens. I mean, I think the tulips are absolutely at their peak right this minute. They're just spectacular. But the blooms change every day. I don't know if any of you got to walk down the drive, but the wisteria is in full bloom. The tree wisteria is in full bloom. It's fantastic. And you might have noticed that the area between where the cafe is and there's a little hillside, the steps that go up towards the mansion, that we cleaned out all those barberries and completely replanted all of that because barberry is an invasive. So we had to take it away. But you can now really see the herb garden there, which you hadn't really been able to see before. And speaking of the cafe, I saw that many of you had got your glass of wine and light snack and whatever. I'm so happy we have our new Merriweather Cafe that has opened, and it will remain open before each lecture in this series. And you can just go down there and get a wonderful glass of wine and so forth. And obviously, members get a discount at, of course, both the cafe and the shop. I know you all know about the shop, but you get, yes, discount on the cafe too. And speaking of the cafe, in June and July, we are going to have a new series that's going to be called Dinnertime Documentaries. And it's about legendary photographers in the last half century. So it's obviously in to celebrate the Eisenstadt exhibition that'll open in June. And the cafe, on those nights, the cafe will offer full-service dining. So you can come and actually have dinner at the cafe, but you can also just come and have a light bite as well, and, you know, the beverages to go. So all of this is on the website, but I just want to tease you, as they say. On June 18th, it will be Harry Benson, Shoot First. I don't know if any of you know who Harry Benson is, but he was the British photographer who's best known for having photographed the Beatles invasion and all of those, you know, the first American tour, Ed Sullivan and all of that. And then on July 10th, we're going to have Bill Cunningham, New York, one of my favorite. Oh, the Times is not the same. It's just not the same. So anyway, that'll be on July 10th, and it's a one. I mean, I've seen the documentary. It is a fantastic documentary, but to really be able to see it instead of on a little screen, to really see it as a full documentary, and then be able to have wonderful dinner in the cafe, just great. And then on July 31st, we'll have Annie Leibovitz, Life Through a Lens, and that's, you know, an intimate portrait of her from her days at Rolling Stone to her relationship with Susan Sontag to her flattering and playful portraits of today's luminaries. So I hope you'll join us, and I hope you'll spread the word, because this is a very new thing for us to have something in the evening and actually be able to have dinner. So I hope it's a success so that the cafe is interested in doing more of this. It'd be great. So it's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker. Richard Stamelman is an emeritus professor of Romance language at Williams College and has taught at Wesleyan University, the University of Colorado, and Dartmouth College. He's currently a visiting professor of media and cultural studies at William and Mary. He's the author of Perfume, Joy, Obsession, Scandal, Sin. Is that like the best title of anything? It's just so great. It's a cultural history of fragrance from 1750 to the present. And of course, he's done a lot of other books and essays on 19th and 20th century French literature, art, photography, and culture. And he's also the translator of French poetry and essays. An honorary member of the Société Française des Parfumeurs. He was made Chevalier dans l'Ordre des Palmes Académiques in 1993 and was awarded a John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship 6 years later. He has taught courses on French and American poetry, the poetics and politics of fashion and perfume, and the history of photography from the 19th century to the present. So he has to come back for the Eisenstadt exhibition. So please join me in welcoming Richard Stamelman.
Well, first, let me thank everybody for coming this evening. I also want to thank Kate for that very nice introduction. I would also like to thank the staff of Hillwood, the people I met, in particular Aaron Laurie, who has been my guide, and as well as Rebecca Tillis, who gave me a wonderful personal view of the exhibition, and we talked a great deal about it. It's a wonderful exhibition. And I would also like to thank George Sokol, who's the person who very adroitly set up this PowerPoint from what I sent him. So the title is The Art and Passion, A Cultural History of Fragrance. It's going to take about an hour. There will be a lot of images, so in that respect, I hope the time will go quickly. And so the first thing I want to talk about is that perfume, in many ways, is very trivial, and it's also very complex. And what's complex about perfume is the narratives that have grown up over the years that surround perfume. And I'm going to talk a great deal about that. Perfume is trivial and complex the way many other everyday objects are that we very often don't even spend a lot of time thinking about. So, in what follows, this is the outline, these are the sections. The narrative in perfume will be the first thing I talk about. Perfume's image system, the artistic representations of fragrance in different media, the 7 classes of perfumes as perfumers tend to categorize them, the ingredients in perfume, floral and animal and synthetic, the structure, the architecture. Perfume, it's hard to believe that something that floats in the air can have a structure, can be engineered. And then the perfume bottle, briefly talk about that. And perfume names, because the name is quite important, as we shall see. And finally, perfume and the images of women. 3 videos produced by Chanel from more or less the 1980s all the way to 2017. You'll see a difference in how women are presented. Okay, so narrative and perfume. This is an ad from 1998 for a perfume, Guerlain perfume called Champs-Élysées. It was the first scent to master mimosa, which is not a very easy fragrance ingredient to basically distill. And in French it says, "La vie est plus belle quand on l'écrit soi-même." Life is more beautiful when you write it yourself. So what does that mean? Well, it means that because we tend to look at these advertisements and not even perhaps think about the slogans or the words that go along with them. What it means basically is that perfume is a question of writing something on your skin, which in many ways is a literal description. It also says that you write your own story, right? That the story and the narrative that you want to present of yourself through perfume is something that you will decide to do. You are the writer of your life. And this particular ad and the slogan add up to what might be called a message of autonomy. And you can't see it down here, but in English it says, life is best played out without a script. Again, you are the author. You make up the script, and you do it by your choice of perfume, and Guerlain hopes that you will choose Champs-Élysées. And one of the things that I probably won't be able to talk about in the course of the lecture, but we can talk about it afterwards, is the concept of what the French called francité, Frenchness. Frenchness. I mean, this is France and Paris in a bottle. You get Champs-Élysées that you put on yourself. You script yourself as a French actress. This is Sophie Marceau, I believe. And you can present yourself as a French man or woman. In the 1970s, the French Commission on Perfume came out with this generic advertisement. Without perfume, the skin cannot speak. All right? Perfume inspires. Perfume provokes. Perfume is a telling. It's a telling speech, and it tells something about you. It's a narrative. It's a story. It articulates the body and the person and the soul of the person who is wearing it. So you are, and your body is a blank page upon which you articulate yourself. One of the things about smell, and we'll get to this later on, smell is an inarticulate sense. I mean, think about how hard it is to describe a smell. Okay, so I want to talk now about the next part of this is the perfume's image system. Now, what is an image system? An image system is a series of images, of course, that surround a particular event, historical, everyday, a particular object, historical, everyday, trivial, not so trivial. And it's part of what's now known as material culture. In other words, there's the belief that trivial objects and artifacts of everyday life are truly revealing not only of the person, but of the entire culture. And so these objects, and the perfume bottle would be one of them, these objects reflect attitudes toward life, toward experience, toward reality, toward gender relations, toward politics. So that an individual everyday object can express and can say things important about culture. What would be examples? Well, one example where politics and philosophy and history join would be the Civil War. War memorials in general. As we know, this has become a very challenging subject now. But war memorials can be this kind of nexus and constellation of many different views. If you just take the Civil War, all you need to do is talk about the three ways one could describe the Civil War, and you can see how there's a host of image systems conflicting, possibly historically racist in that description. Some, perhaps not many, prefer to look at the Civil War as the war of northern aggression. Another one is the War of Secession. That's what it's called in French, for example, when they refer to our Civil War. And of course, the Civil War is the Civil War, which is probably its most common name. Take, for example, another image system, your affiliation with your university, or your having grown up in, let's say, in New York City, the Big Apple, or there have now been studies of the pencil. There's a professor at Duke who's a professor of engineering who wrote a whole book on the pencil. We never really spend much time thinking about the pencil, but the pencil is really wonderful. It's, you remember Ford Ticonderoga pencils? And another example would be the beginning of the Ford motor car, or Kodak. Kodak in the 1880s came out with a slogan, which was, "You press the button, we do the rest." And then in 1898, I think, they came out with the Brownie camera. So, in other words, collective memory and patriotism and politics and philosophy and experience, and the experience of your grandparents and of your college, let's say, all that comes together in an image. So, to define it once and for all, what is the scented image system? What is the perfume's image system? It is a culturally and socially constructed, often, this is important, unstated and often unconscious repertoire and cluster or constellation of beliefs, habits, practices, rituals, values, protocols, taboos, even falsehoods. Falsehoods are, unfortunately, become part of the image system. And these associations are literally, these systems are literally in the air, so to speak. And sometimes they are manipulative because you're being controlled by them and you don't even know it. isn't advertising based on that. They're controlling and they're embedded within culture. Let me give you an example of, okay, let me just talk a minute and then we'll start this up. I'm going to show you a video commercial for Chanel's No. 5 from the 1970s. And there are many different strands of the imaginary or the image system here. And in fact, there are 6 of them. So let me play it for you. Let's see, here we go. Made before Photoshop. I don't know how they did it, but they did do it. So what are these 6 imaginary types or image systems that are working here? The first, of course, is romance, and you saw it in flirtatiousness. The woman is hanging onto the man's arm. The next would be capriciousness. The woman moves her head about from side to side. She looks behind her. She smiles. The next would be giddiness, a certain joie de vivre. The suggestion of impulsiveness, of this woman, elle fait à sa tête, she does what she wants to do. There's delight and laughter in her what you see. Self-confidence, she's calling the shots here. Charm, of course, and great femininity. So romance. Second image system is magic. This woman literally creates a situation where a whole orchestra arises from the ocean, like Venus coming out of a seashell, right? The power of woman to basically create a situation like this. The third image system, the third powerful imaginary here is music. It starts out with a woman's voice singing. There is a score blown in the wind at the beginning. You have a number of music stands. So there's an association between perfume and music, a very close one as we shall see, and the artistic aesthetic reality of the woman. Beauty goes without speaking. This woman is elegant, graceful, sophisticated. Above all, the centrality of the woman. The man is merely a prop. You just don't see his face. All you do is you see him from behind, and she leans on him, but he doesn't count for anything in this particular advertisement. And that's really important. And finally, the 6th one is, in order to pay tribute and homage to this woman and her beauty and to Chanel No. 5, no less a creator than Beethoven is called to basically play this tribute. Beethoven's Violin Concerto in D major, Opus 61, salutes the woman. So, this is Chanel No. 5, right? 1921, the bottle has not changed since that time, 80 years or so. And recently I was talking about the Chanel bottles. What's interesting about this is Chanel's bottles have always been square or rectangular. Until several years ago, well, maybe only about 10 years ago, they came out with a perfume called Chance, which is round. They broke the mold, but it's still a very simple, minimalist, and that's the key. Minimalism is the key to the Chanel style. All right, so why a drop of 5 and nothing else? Well, in February of 1974, Marilyn Monroe got off an airplane in Tokyo and was asked by a Japanese correspondent, Miss Monroe, what do you wear in the morning? She said, oh, I may lie around the house in my pajamas. I'm making that up. What do you do in the afternoon? Well, I may put on a day dress and go out with the friends and have lunch. And in the evening, yes, I may wear, something more formal and everything, and to sleep with. And she said 5 drops of Chanel No. 5. All right. So Chanel, of course, has used that as part of its advertising way back in the 1970s. All right, it seems somehow 5 drops of No. 5 have been reduced to 1 drop. Maybe the formula is stronger. I'm not sure. Okay, artistic figurations of fragrance. Smell, as I said before, is inarticulate. Smell is invisible. Smell is mute. So how have poets and writers and musicians and artists generally, how have they attempted to represent what can't be seen, what cannot really be articulated in language, and what doesn't really have a form when it is released from its bottle? How do they give it voice, form, and visibility? And we're going to start with art. On the other side there, you have a painting by John Singer Sargent from 1898. It's called Smoke of Ambergris. And it's a woman who is burning ambergris in an incense burner below her. And as the smoke rises, she's capturing the scent in the hood that she's wearing over her head. All right. This one is an absolutely beautiful painting by Pierre Bonnat, French painter. At this time, she was his mistress, but eventually he married her. Her name is Marthe. And what you have here is perfume as a kind of solar experience. She's holding the bottle right there, and she's standing in a room as if she were waiting for the light to come in and surround her in a certain kind of illumination and radiance. And interestingly, the go-between, or the intermediary between her, the light coming in, and herself, is the perfume bottle. She's a goddess of light in some respects. This one I particularly like. This is by Luigi Russolo, who was a futurist painter. He painted this in 1910. It's called Perfume. Futurism was a short-lived movement that began in 1909, probably died out by the beginning of World War I. It was a movement, mostly Italian, of artists who wanted to celebrate speed, dynamic motion, chaos, vortices, the frenzy of the machine, the mythic vitality of the present. They have one manifesto in which they say, burn the universities, burn the libraries, the past is dead. And of course, they also celebrated war. They were probably proto-fascist in some respects, but they were important, at least for the years that they existed. What Russolo is doing here, you have to imagine that this woman has just opened a bottle of perfume down here. And what he has done is he shows the vibrations, the kind of frenzied representation of the olfactive experience. As the perfume, the fusion of the perfume rises up, becomes stronger and stronger because of the yellow color, it surrounds the woman's head, and she's almost taken away, possessed, enraptured by it. It moves around her head, and as it moves around her head, it dissipates somewhat as you have little lozenges of pink, red, and blue. It even seems to be breaking up her head as it moves around her as it's dissipating. So what Russolo did here with these arabesques of color and light was to represent the expansive luminescence of perfume as if it were light. It was his way of showing how perfume works. The next art form is music. Music is the art form that is closest to perfume. As we'll see in a minute, a lot of the terms of perfumery are terms taken from music. It is the closest to perfume for a number of reasons. Both music and perfume, in a general sense, are abstract. They're invisible. They're airborne. They're waves that travel through the air. And they're tied to memory. But one thing I want to really stress, and this shows the link between the perfumer who is called a composer and musicians, is that a musician can, in his or her mind, think, conceive a combination of notes, maybe even a chord. And in order to make sure that it's not just a hallucination, he or she may go to the piano and try out the notes and try the chord. It's the same thing with a perfumer, with a really gifted perfumer. A perfumer can, in his or her mind, put together ingredients, floral ingredients, synthetic ingredients, and have a concept of what that mixture may smell like. And then he or she will test it out, again, manually. Not playing a piano, but basically using scent strips, like as you see right here, scent strips, and putting together a number of ingredients on a scent strip. So here's the vocabulary that's very much like music. The perfumer is called a composer. He works with notes, fragrant notes, puts them into chords or accords, into harmonies, And up until probably the Second World War, and especially in the 19th century or maybe beginning of the 20th, a perfumer would work at a desk with tiered shelves, and each shelf would have a whole host of bottles. Each bottle would have a particular kind of ingredient. Rose here, jasmine here, musk there. And that was called a perfume organ or a harmonium. And if you've been to Sephora, which is a French perfume store, which is all over the United States now, and you've used these little scent strips. In French, they're called les mouillettes, from the French word mouiller, which means to moisten. But more importantly, they're also called les touches. It's the same word. Les touches is the French word for the ivory keys of a piano. So again, yet another link. All right, now I want to take you through a kind of a progression from music to literature to perfume to advertising by using a musical piece that you all may know. It's the Kreutzer Sonata by Beethoven, and also linking it to a perfume that was very popular in the 1940s called Taboo. All right, so we're going to start with Beethoven, the Kreutzer Sonata. He first wrote it in 1803. He had a different name for it. He changed it in 1805 in tribute to a violinist of the period who was extremely well known, Kreutzer. Then in 1890, Tolstoy writes a novella called the Kreutzer Sonata. And then in 1901, the French painter, not all that well known, René Prinet, creates his interpretation of the Tolstoy story in this painting. And then in 1941, Taboo, which came from a Spanish perfume company called Dana, created an advertisement using the Prinet photo. So let's start with, I'm not pushing the right button here. Okay, so this is a little bit and piece of the Violin Sonata No. 9, the Kreutzer Sonata. Okay, here's the story. There's a man on a train, and he's in Russia, and another man, a stranger, gets on the train, and the man on the train starts talking to the stranger, and as happens very often, it's easy to tell a stranger some of your darkest secrets, and he starts telling the stranger that he has murdered his wife. And the reason he's murdered his wife is that she's a pianist, and they were fighting a lot, and so he decided that maybe she would calm down if she started doing a duet with a violinist. So they started playing together, and the man on the train, the narrator of the story, became obsessively jealous. He was sure they were having an affair. And so obsessed was he by this that he set up a kind of a trap for them, and he rushed into the house thinking he would find them in flagrant delicto, and there she was playing the piano and the other guy was playing the violin. Nevertheless, he was so obsessed he killed his wife, and the violinist ran away, so he escaped. All right. So in the story, which is a very interesting story, the husband, the narrator, the murderer, he tells the stranger that he has persuaded himself that the violinist, as a result of the intimacy arising out of the violinist and the wife playing together, and of the effect produced on impressionable natures by music, especially violin music, they would inevitably this would not only appeal to her, but this violinist would unquestionably and without the slightest hesitation conquer her, crush her, twist her around his little finger, do with her anything he wanted. Thus is the power of music, according to this obsessive narrator. He continues, everyone knows that it's precisely music that causes most of the adulteries in our class of society. The Kreutzer Sonata, its first movement, the presto, can one really allow it to be played in a drawing room full of women in low-cut dresses? The bond of music is the most refined form of sensual lust. Well, one could argue also that the bond of perfume is also connected to sensual lust. And so, in 1901, René Prinet imagines this scene. And what you have is the violinist has moved to the front of the piano, and he has basically swept the woman up in his arms. she's still got her hand on the piano, and she's totally surprised by this. But what's interesting is that what should have been a duet with equal partners turns out here to be the master violinist who is basically oppressing or appropriating or even seducing the woman. Now, we move to the perfume, Taboo, 1902. Taboo, which Dana wanted to call the forbidden fragrance, had a dominant note of patchouli, which is a very earthy scent, very heavy, daringly sensual. It had 10% of patchouli in it. And it was created by a Frenchman. The Taboo company, which was located in Spain, asked Jean-Carl, a Frenchman, to come to Barcelona and to invent this perfume. Dana eventually, during the war, moved to New York City in 1942. All right, so according to the myth, Dana told Jean-Carl in the brief that they gave to him saying what they wanted this perfume to do, they said, "We want you to make a perfume a prostitute would wear." Right? Therefore, the name Taboo. All right. Now we move to the advertisement, which I talked about before. Once again, it is now called the forbidden fragrance. And just so that you won't think that this is something that's, 1942, times have changed. No. This is the ad for Taboo today, all right? The ad for Taboo today is basically no longer called the forbidden fragrance, but it is the same paradigm. I mean, seriously, at least this guy is a violinist. This guy is just a, Chippendale, for all we know. He's just the model. He has no right to basically do this. He's not even an artist or something. But he comes over, he sweeps her up. You'll notice that the heel of her foot is raised up. She still has her hand painting, she's the creative artist here. She's the person who is doing something and not just basically standing. And it's now called Blame It on Taboo, all right? Again, the woman is not responsible for her actions. She's carried away, whatever her artistic mastery or genius may be, makes no difference. She is surrendered to passion, and the blame is not her fault. Her fault.
So who's wearing the taboo, him or her?
Okay. I don't know. Let me just, because the next thing I'm going to talk about, and let me just give you a quote from a text, because we're going to go back now thousands of years. In this text, the first word of this text is, "Kiss me, make me drunk with your kisses." All right? Who in the world would say that? Okay? Well, it's in the Bible. Kiss is the first word of the Song of Songs. And I just want to explain a bit. Song of Songs has so many scents and fragrances in it. It has myrrh, it has aloes, it has henna blossoms, frankincense, spices, fragrant oils, honey and milk, scent of Lebanon, spikenard, pomegranate, apricots. I could go on and on. And so what is it? What is it about the Song of Songs, which goes all the way back to the 3rd century before the Christian era? And in a minute, we'll talk about why is this thing in the Bible. All right, it's a dialogue between a bridegroom, okay, and the bride. And they are two young people who have discovered love for the first time and passion for the first time. So it is a very passionate chapter in the Bible. It's also the shortest chapter in the Bible. The bridegroom says, "Your love is more fragrant than wine. Fragrant is the scent of your perfume, and your name like perfume poured out." And the bride responds, "My king lay down beside me, and my fragrance wakened the night. All night between my breasts, my love is a cluster of myrrh. Before day breathes, before the shadows of night are gone, I will hurry to the mountain of myrrh, the hill of frankincense." So, this, as I said, is a poem of passion. And unlike Romeo and Juliet, it's not a tragic poem. It's a celebration. No one dies in the Song of Songs. It's not irrational the way you might think Romeo and Juliet or Tristan and Isolde is. There's a great deal of naturalness in this love. All right, so it's an erotic love poem, probably sourced before the 3rd century BCE, probably coming out of a Persian or Mesopotamian or Egyptian love poem. And so the question is, why in the Old Testament? I mean, and the reason is both the Christian fathers and also the rabbis basically had an interpretation. They basically look at this Song of Songs allegorically. It's a figuration of God's love, these are the rabbis, it's a figuration of God's love for the Jewish people. It's the eroticism of faith. This eros is not sexual, it's spiritual, it's transcendental. It's the loving relationship that a person may have as that person moves toward God. Eros, in a sense, is a movement toward something. So that's how it got interpreted, and that's how it got it remained in the Bible. Also, it had the sponsorship of one of the most important rabbis of the time, who basically referred to the Song of Songs as the Holy of Holies. Rabbi Akiva, his name is. All right, so it also then goes into the New Testament. How did the Christian fathers look at it? Well, they also looked at it allegorically, and for them, the bridegroom is Christ, the bride is the church, or the Virgin Mary, or the soul of a believer. So it is an important work of perfume imagery. Now we move to the 20th century, early part of the 20th century, and Guillaume Apollinaire is a French poet who is really responsible for creating what might be called modernist poetry. He brought the city of Paris into his poems, the honking of horns and klaxons, and so he's a very important modernist poet. He also was a soldier. He was in the war, First World War, in the trenches. There's a famous picture of him with his head bandaged up because he was wounded during the First World War. And he had a number of women that he fell in love with, but one in particular, in 1915, was a woman named Louise de Coligny, and he once wrote this poem to her called Guirlande de Lou, Garland for Lou, or of Lou. And what's interesting is that Apollinaire is in the trenches, and she's somewhere else in France, and all of a sudden he is able to call to mind in his reverie her smell. And so these are just a few lines from the poem. Eyes closed, I smell the heliotrope of your veins. Your eyes, soft as cedar, exhale a perfume my own eyes understand. Your voice, your dear voice, blossoms like tuberoses, enchanting life. The aroma of your body is time's happiness. He sees her, even though his eyes are closed, and he sees her because of his ability to recall her smell. I smell the heliotrope of your veins. That's an incredibly intimate image. She becomes intensely and physically present in his mind as he's writing the poem, and the words and the recall of the smell move together. The other poet, who, when we're going back to the 19th century now, who is, in a sense, I like to call him equivalent to Shakespeare in the English language, is Charles Baudelaire. Baudelaire wrote a book in poems in 1857 called The Flowers of Evil. He is the most olfactive poet, I think, in the Western world. And he says he's also remembering a distant woman, but in this case, the woman has broken up with him. He's standing on a balcony in Paris, looking at out and twilight, and he's thinking of the last time he was on this balcony with this woman, Jeanne, whom he loved. And he writes, as I bent over you, queen of worshipped women, I believed I could smell the perfume of your blood. Apollinaire could smell the heliotrope of her veins. He can smell the perfume of her blood. What is it about these poetic olfactory vampires? What stimulates them to imagine inhaling the sensual scent of the beloved's blood? It's as if the beloved is the perfume bottle. She's been made into this container of a smell, and they remember her, they identify her, and they capture her essence, so to speak, in imagining that they have possessed her her smell. Now Baudelaire has a lot of reasons why perfume is important to him, and one of the ones that it needs to be mentioned is that for him, in a poem called The Flacon, the flask, it is the sign of memory, resurrected memory. All you need to do is take an old bottle of perfume that doesn't have any liquid in it, but you've had sealed up for a while, and smell in it, and all of a sudden you will smell the perfume, and you will also smell whatever you associate with the perfume. A little anatomical anatomical, physiological fact is that of all the five senses, smell is the one that reaches the brain the fastest. It passes only through two synapses and then reaches the brain, the olfactory, the limbic system of the brain, the paleocortex, which is the old brain, so to speak. And that is, the limbic system is responsible for anger, fear, pleasure, emotions, the drives, domination, hunger, sex, instinct, mood. So that's why perfume and smell are so important anatomically and physiologically speaking. All right, now the 7 classes of perfume. The perfumers tend to identify and have probably since right before World War II 7 general categories. And then there are subcategories and sub-subcategories involving different mixtures of these major master categories. The first is citrus. We all know the citrus perfumes because the eau de cologne are mostly made out of citrus for both men and women. And they feature essential oils from lemon, bergamot, which is an orange, and mandarin. Then the floral, which of course is the largest of any possible category of perfumes. Either they're a single flower perfume, which is called a soliflor, or they're a bouquet of a mixture of many different perfumes. And so rose, tuberose, violet, iris, jasmine, many different flowers make up the floral category. The third is called, in French, it's called fougère, which is the French word for fern. But ferns don't really have much of a smell. What fern perfumes designate are perfumes that basically have the smell of grass or freshly cut hay, lavender, vetiver, anything having to do with a forest, but not the woodiness of a forest. You can think of men's scents that men skin bracer, for example, might be an example of a green scent. The fourth category right here, keep on pushing the wrong button. This is chypre. Has nothing to do with natural ingredients at all. Chypre is it's the French word for cypress. Chypre was the name of a perfume that François Coty, who was a great perfumer of the early part of the 20th century, he died in the 1930s, I think. He created chypre. And what he did that no other perfumer had ever done is he put together 2 ingredients, bergamot, which is a form of orange, and oak moss. So very often perfumes that have a blend of oak moss and bergamot are called chypre. You all know the smell of bergamot because it's the smell of Earl Grey tea. And so that's the bergamot side of it. And of course, bergamot and oak moss are mixed with other elements as well. Crêpe de Chine, in 1925 is an example. Diarella, eau sauvage for men would be an example. The 5th category, way over there, is boisé or woody. And these are warm, rich notes that basically come from sandalwood or patchouli, which I mentioned before. They tend to be dry scents like vetiver or cedar, and they're found very often in men's scents. The most intoxicating, the most bewitching, the most powerful, the ones that leave a trail that cannot be undone quickly are called, in French, the amber perfumes, the ambre, or more often, oriental perfumes. These are soft, warm, powdery. They can be very heavy and sensuous sometimes. Their dominant notes are vanilla, jasmine, rose, tuberose, frankincense, and animal notes, which I'll talk about in a minute. Examples would be Shalimar from 1925, Poison, Opium, Samsara would be examples. Now the French have a word for what is left when, let's say, a woman wearing one of these perfumes walks out of an elevator, but she's not there anymore, and the elevator goes down to the 4th floor, up to the 4th floor, and then when it comes down to the 1st floor, people get on and they smell something. Now the French word for that is sillage. It comes from the French word sillon, which is what a boat leaves in it. It's the wake of a boat, sillon. So sillage is the wake of a perfume. And usually these perfumes, the orientals, they're also called in French with the word sulfureux, which means sulfurous. Not because there's anything to do with sulfur, as we know, but sulfureux is tied to the devil. So a translation of sulfureux would be demonic or devilish. And the last category, these are perfumes that either smell like tobacco or smell like leather, of course. Russian leather, English leather would be examples. And they're based on an animal scent which comes from a beaver. It's called Castoreum. And that's because the Siberian beaver likes to chew on birch bark. And the birch bark gets into its system. And so when, and I'll talk about that in a minute, when an element of the body of the Castoreum is removed, it has the smell, basically, of birch bark. So these are the seven families. All right, floral, animal, and synthetic ingredients. Gum resins. Gum resins usually make up the base of a perfume, mainly because they're very tenacious. What you have here is frankincense. This is a tree, it's either in Oman or Yemen, and what the man is doing is he's making a cut in the bark, and the sap runs out. He lets the initial run of the sap disappear or drop, and then he begins to collect the second batch, so to speak. And that's placed in the sun, and that's frankincense. That's what is used in perfume. Of course, it's chopped up and crushed up. So they're very important, myrrh, frankincense, lavender, and other things like that. The animal scents. These are powerful, and very, very ill-smelling ingredients in their natural form. The first one is musk, the musk deer. This is a little deer. It's the size of a greyhound, lives about 8,000 feet up in the Himalayas. It was at once used as an aphrodisiac in China. And of course, the finest musk used to come from Tibet. Musk is an endangered species. It may even have been wiped out. So no musk, which it still is in perfume, no musk is natural. Not at all. It is all synthetic. Because the musk deer has to be killed in order for these pods to be removed. And the pods are what contain the powerful musk smell. It is said that the civet cat, which is an Ethiopian cat, that this is the most evil smelling of all four animal scents. And it is called civet, of course. The next one, as I mentioned, is the beaver. Castor is the Latin word for beaver. So Castoreum, again, it comes from a pod. Now, these three animal scents are tied in one way or the other physiologically with the sexual glands of these three animals. The one animal who does not donate anything having to do with his or her sexual organs is the whale. And that's where ambergris comes from. It is from the sperm whale. What happens is that whales have a tendency to ingest a lot of cuttlefish. Cuttlefish have very, very sharp beaks. And so naturally, for some reason, because of Darwinian evolution, a lining is created inside the stomach of the sperm whale to protect that stomach from the beaks of the cuttlefish. Every once in a while, and I'm not sure how often it happens, the poor sperm whale develops colic and rises to the surface. And according to sailors, there are sounds of enormous tummy rumbles and monstrous belches as basically the sperm whale extrudes and excretes that lining. And that lining is the beginning of ambergris. Ambergris can float, usually in the Pacific Ocean, for decades, if not centuries. And during that time, it oxidizes because of the influence of the salt water, the sun, the air, becomes gray in color. It's referred to as the gold of the ocean. And there have been cases where people in Australia or New Zealand have stumbled on ambergris, and I assure you they make more money on that than winning a lottery, because it's extremely rare. Now, a quick word about synthetics. Synthetics are absolutely essential to the creation of perfume. A synthetic does not mean it's a cheaper perfume. Some of these synthetics are created by chemical companies and patented, and they're very expensive. So that the perfume companies have to pay a lot of money to use these synthetic ingredients. Why are synthetics used? Well, one reason, as I just explained, is that the animal, let's say, is basically protected and they can't extract, let's say, musk anymore. The other is there are certain flowers that cannot be distilled. There are certain flowers that are destroyed when the distillation process takes place, and the molecules can't be extracted, or there are not enough molecules. So in some cases, like gardenia, there are a lot of perfumes, especially from the 1920s or 30s, that are gardenia perfumes. They smell like gardenia, but they probably have no gardenia in them. So the best way of looking at synthetics is the way two colors can be put together to create a new tone of color. A synthetic can be put next to a natural ingredient and bring out in the natural ingredient something that another natural ingredient placed next to it has never been able to accomplish. All right, the structure and the architecture of perfume. It's usually shown as a pyramid. And you have to understand that there are three levels. They're referred to as either the top or head, the middle or the heart, and the base and the soul. And I've got a comparison here between perfume and eau de toilette, toilet water. And you'll see why toilet water is so much less expensive than perfume. The one other thing I do want to point out is the way, how long these particular notes in this structure last. The top or the head note lasts about 2 minutes. The middle note can last 2 to 4 hours. And the base note, and here's where you get a big difference, the base note in a really high-end perfume can last a day or even longer. And that can happen perhaps in the toilet water, but it's rare. But the key here is the percentage of the absolute. The absolute is the purest, most costly aspect of a perfume. The percentage of the absolute that goes into each one of the three tiers. In the perfume, I can't see here, what does it say, 15%? Yes. Yeah, okay. 15% of the absolute is in the top. Over in the toilet water, it's 50%, much larger. The middle and the heart, they're about the same. Okay, I think, I can't see it on here, but what is it? 34, here it's 30. But the big difference is in the base. Now the base is what holds the whole composition together. It's made up of fixatives. It gives a perfume tenacity, duration, permanence. It really is an important element. It's only 20% of the whole composition, as opposed to 45 to 55% in the perfume. These base elements are very expensive, and that's why a perfume is going to cost a lot more than an eau de toilette. The other thing is, because of the amount of time when the top and the middle notes disappear, you should never buy a perfume that you just try on in the store. First of all, they become very, very expensive. I mean, $200, $300 for a bottle of perfume has become the norm. So you don't really know how it's going to smell on you unless you go back the next day and, because you've, let's say, decided that you like it, and buy it. But buying it for $300 after just trying the top note is an exercise in futility, I would say. All right, the perfume bottle. These are Guerlain bottles. Guerlain was founded in 1828. And these are bottles from its history. This is the bee bottle with little bees incised in the glass. It goes back to 1853. This is the snail bottle. As you see, it's in the form of a snail. This is in the show, the exhibition. This is called the heart-shaped stopper. They use it for different ones, but the one in the show, I think, is for l'heure bleue, blue hour. This is a very cute one called the tortoise bottle. This, of course, is the very famous Shalimar bottle, Batwing bottle. This is the Radiant bottle, which came out in 1932. Aviation was very popular in France in the 1930s, and not only did this indicate kind of the movement of a propeller of an airplane, but it's also an Art Deco motif, and it's called Vol de Nuit, Night Flight. And if you've ever read Le Petit Prince, The Little Prince, by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he was a pilot, among other things, but he also wrote a book called Night Flight. It's a lantern bottle. This is it's called Lieu. It's also an Art Deco design. It's a snuff bottle, and it's named after a character in Puccini's opera Turandot, which premiered the year before this bottle came out. And then you have the Samsara bottle here. Now, for those of you who are collectors of bottles, and there are quite a lot of people who do, over on the other side, Guerlain decided to celebrate the bee bottle, and they had Baccarat create this particular bottle here in a numbered edition, 57 numbered flasks, $19,000 each. And you could also buy the gold wing version for, just $7,000 more. To celebrate the 100th anniversary of L'Heure Bleue, Guerlain also got Baccarat to design this perfume bottle. Same idea, numbered flacon, and each one was $14,500. Okay, so what is in a perfume name? One thing that probably many people don't realize is that perfume appeals to people because of the way the advertising system is set up. Perfume appeals to people more through visual and verbal means than olfactive means. In the beginning, someone is attracted to a perfume sometimes by the ads on television or by the ads in fashion magazines. So it's only then that somebody may go into a store and try the perfume. So what are the different names? Names are really important. Well, romantic love, and here we have a list of them. Amour, amour, je reviens means I return. Aphrodisia. Chamade is a very interesting name. This one right here. Chamade is the French word for the beating of a heart, but it's also the name of what a drummer in an army that is surrendering does when that drummer drums. It's called beating the chamade. So you get the idea that this is a perfume that not only will cause your heart to beat, but it will also be a drumbeat of surrender for you. Boudoir is another example. The one I like is Adieu sagesse, which means farewell to wisdom or throw wisdom to the wind. Okay, passion. Of course, there has to be passion. So there's boudoir, shocking, nude, between the sheets. The ce soir ou jamais, right here, tonight or never. Happiness. No perfume that you can buy is called bipolar. None. You can see the names: joy, happy, euphoria, eternity, marry me, pleasures. All right. And then finally, and don't know why this is so appealing, but this is an ad for Opium. The first one is here. This is Jerry Hall, the model. And in French it says, for those who give themselves to Yves Saint Laurent in 1977. It's obvious that she is in an opium den, but she is in a state of narcosis, oblivion, surrender, stupor, whatever you want to call it. And this one over here, this is, I'm sorry, go back here. This one is Sophie Dahl, who I believe is the niece of Roald Dahl, who wrote Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. Yes, very different image from that children's story. This particular ad was not appreciated in England. So this is another version, and here's a more, well, I guess I don't, yes I do, here it is. Perfume and the Images of Women. This is a new perfume from Carolina Herrera. It's called Good Girl, and it comes in a presentation box that is a high heel shoe, all right, and the bottle is inside the shoe, as you can see right here, all right? And it's called Good Girl. But if you read the, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but if you read what the slogan is, the slogan basically is, it's so good to be bad. And that image, of course, says everything you want to say, okay? Now I want to show you 3 images of women from 3 commercials, advertising commercials from Chanel. The first one is what I call Coco, the Woman Captive. This was a film in which the actress and singer Vanessa Paradis, at one time the companion of Johnny Depp, this came out, she is presented, as you'll see in a minute, as a caged bird of paradise. The company that made this commercial for Chanel took over a military hangar outside of Paris. They built a gigantic cage that probably was about 30 or 40 feet high. And they had a trapeze in there, and they put Vanessa Paradis on that trapeze. She swung back and forth. You'll notice that she starts whistling stormy weather, and there's lightning and thunder that you hear. And as she's swinging back and forth, she has a gigantic bottle of cocoa, turns it upside down, it spills out. And pay particular attention to the fact that up near the top, there's this strange eye looking at her, which happens to be the eye of a cat. And then the next image is an image in a room very beautiful apartment room with a tiny little bird cage and a tiny little person in the bird cage and a cat next to it, and a woman wearing a Chanel suit, which was very popular in the 1970s, who looks very much like Coco Chanel. Also, the apartment that you see looks out on the Place Vendôme. It's the same vista you would have if you stayed in the Hotel Ritz in Paris at the Place Vendôme, where Coco Chanel lived for a while. And if it's any interest to you, somewhere I came across the fact that in order to spend a night in the Chanel suite at 15 Place Vendôme, it's $11,000 a night. So save your money. Okay, here's the ad. Okay, Coco, l'esprit de Chanel. All right, Coco died in 1971. But her spirit, her ghost, both of them live on. She's reincarnated, especially in this perfume, Coco. The image here, this particular print ad was banned in the UK, mainly because it showed an image of what the French would call ligotage, a woman tied up. The woman here is a bird woman. She's fragile. She's scared, she's disempowered, she's dehumanized, a cat lusts after her. She needs still, though, be tied up and contained. And so this is not what one might call the most positive image of womanhood, that, but maybe in the 1980s it had appeal. So now we're going to look at another image from Chanel No. 5 from this is from the 1998, I believe. This was the Christmas season, 1998. And in this case, the woman tames an animal. It does not become the prey of an animal. She tames and dominates an animal who is a brute, and it's based more or less on the Beauty and Beast motif, as you will see. Also, it has the Little Red Riding Hood fairy tale attached to it. It's called Le Loup, the Wolf. It was directed by Luc Besson, who's an extremely well-known French director of full-length movies. And it was, as I said, created for the 1998 Christmas TV season. And you'll notice at the end, when the actress, who's an American, Stella Warren, opens these doors, you see the snow out there, the Eiffel Tower lit up, and it's really quite beautiful. All right, so let's watch this one. All right, so we have a different image here of a woman. First of all, the fact that she walks into a vault, Chanel No. 5, No. 5 is written on that vault, means that this is a treasure. No. 5 is a treasure. And when she walks into it, it's as if we don't have gold bullion there, but we have a wall of Chanel No. 5 bottles that have this golden color to them. So Chanel No. 5 is a treasure. It's precious, but this woman knows the code to get into the vault. That's important as well, which means she knows how to use it, and she's going to teach her grandmother how to use it too, because she's taken a bottle to go. So here, the image of woman is, she's in control, she has mastery. The relations between the sexes, if the wolf is to be taken metaphorically, will no longer be determined by a man's animal instincts or by, those are shushed, if you want to look at it that way. Now we come to the final one. This is Gabrielle, which was created in 2017. Gabrielle was also a name of Coco, Coco Gabrielle Chanel. And here, the empowered woman rules. And one thing you should notice, the actress here is Kristen Stewart. And in the beginning, she like wakes up and doesn't know where she is, and she's surrounded by this gossamer net that she has to break away from. And as she wakes, she's like a butterfly coming into existence, and she tries to free herself, and she runs, and she's pulled back by the web, and then she frees herself from it, and she goes flying into a wall, this time a wall of bottles of Gabrielle. And then she ends up on the other side of the wall, which she destroys, facing a dawning sun. Okay, so here is this ad.
These four lonely walls have changed the way I feel. I'm standing still. Running from myself. Together we'll leave it all. I'm running from myself no more. I'm ready to face it all. I'm running.
Gabrielle Chanel, the new fragrance.
What makes this really powerful commercial is Beyonce. Beyonce is singing this song, which stresses self-reliance, independence, confidence, determination, and self-assertiveness. Basically, it starts, these four lonely walls change the way I feel. And then we have that repetition 7 times of running. Ain't running for myself no more. Together we'll win it all. And then we have another 7 repetitions of running. Ain't running from myself no more. I'm ready to face it all. And it is really, I think, quite a powerful ad.
Did anyone buy the perfume?
In fact, it's not doing that well in the United States. Now that you ask, and I got this from the person who's the nose of Chanel, who's a friend. It's not doing well because Kristen Stewart is not looked upon the way Catherine Deneuve would be for some reason. She's too much associated, I guess, with the Twilight movies. Yeah. I don't know. And that's a shame because she's been in other movies with Juliette Binoche, and she's been excellent. But for some reason, the sales are off. I have smelled it. My wife has smelled it. It's a wonderful perfume. And it's also created now by not Jacques Poge, who's been the nose of Chanel since the 1980s, by his son, Olivier. And Olivier Poge, this is his perfume. So I think it's a wonderful perfume. I don't know why it's not doing well. So this is the conclusion. And Louise de Villemorin was a French writer of fashion, and in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And she wrote this description of the imaginary of perfume, of what perfume means to her or to a culture. And note the verbs, which I've highlighted. Perfume rescues imagination. It answers questions posed by our tomorrows, and without lying, recounts the history of the societies it once crowned with a halo. It explains customs, styles of languor or liveliness, and fashions of the boudoir. It is the soul of a house, the soul of memory, and the soul of nostalgia. And this is an absolutely beautiful incarnation, representation of what perfume is, created by René Gros, who is a graphic designer and advertising genius, mostly for Dior. He did all their advertising for their lipstick and their perfumes and their eau de cologne. This is called The Image of Perfume. And what's wonderful about it is that you see a woman literally as if she were a flower, or the stalk of a flower, and then the blossom of a flower, coming out of the bottle, being born of the bottle, and being evaporated into the air, so that the perfume gives birth to this silhouetted face, this profile face of the woman, and it inscribes her loveliness on the air. And once again, we see that uplifted chin, the nose in the air, the eyes closed, which we have seen before in some other representations of perfume. So this image, for me at least, represents the fragrant story of what perfume is, and the fragrant spirit of perfume as it becomes airborne and as it permeates and invades our entire culture. And that is, in a sense, what I would call the image system of perfume. So thank you very much. So I'll be happy to take questions if you have any questions. Yeah.
You said you had seen the exhibit, Perfume and Seduction, here at Hillwood.
Yeah.
And it's the perfume and seduction moves through different times, and it seems to have a lot to do with either covering bodily odors or when you become cleaner, refreshing the air. Is perfume more important now, or how is it different in that?
I think in the 18th century, 19th century, there was a feeling that, yes, perfumes were a way of hiding odors. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, that's right. I have a little note here. The question is, in the show, the exhibition, Perfume and Seduction, whether the perfumes that are shown, let's say in the 18th century, which are shown also as being something that you would use to hide odors, bad odors, whether that continues today in the minds of the advertisers or the creators of perfume. I don't think that's, I mean, yes, there are deodorizers, okay, but that's not part of the perfume industry. Although Givaudan Rohr, which is a big chemical company, and IFF, International Flavors and Fragrances, which is the largest fragrance company in the world, which is American and headquartered in New York, they do have divisions that are developing, deodorized toilet paper and things like that. But they also have divisions that deal just with perfumes. So from the point of view of perfumes, I don't think perfumes are used today to hide odors. In the 18th century, and probably even before that, perfumes were rarely applied to the skin. Everything was perfume except the skin. Hair, lace, clothing, underwear, things like that, men's wigs. So it was rarely applied to the body. And of course that has changed now. But today I do not think that perfumes are bought in order to disguise odors. They're bought in order to create an expression of the person who is wearing it. Because sometimes perfumes will not, the molecules just won't agree with you and with the skin that you have. But when you choose a perfume that you really like, it's a way of projecting your personality and who you are into the air. And so it's not really to hide anymore, I think, which it used to do. Because one of the things about it, there was a countess, I can't remember her name, who in the year 1900, basically, when she was a child or when she was a teenager, she took she bathed once a year. Okay? And England was much ahead of France when it came to installing showers and toilets and that sort of thing in their apartments than was true in France. So, the miasma, there's a wonderful book by a French historian, which is called, in English, it's called The Foul and the Fragrant. And it's the history of smell in Paris from more or less the 16th century through the end of the 19th century. In French, it's called miasme, le miasme et la jonquille, which is basically miasma and daffodil. The title is much better in English. But if you really want to know about the hygienic power of scent, which were very simple in the 18th century, and they weren't complicated. They were jasmine oil, rose oil, that sort of thing. That book is really quite enlightening. There was another question back here. Yeah.
So I think a lot of the perfumes you showed were from companies that have been around for centuries,
Yes.
right? And so I think what's happened that's interesting in the last decade is kind of really the disruption of that industry by new companies like Glossier, or even DC has, I can think of 5 perfume makers, right?
Yeah.
Who are just kind of doing small batches. How has that impacted kind of what's happened? And, for example, you were saying, well, I don't know why this new perfume by Chanel isn't selling. Is it, you know, competition from these smaller upstarts, or how has it kind of changed the game?
The question is that that's being posed is there are a lot of boutique perfume companies, or not even companies, but perfumers who have set up their own establishments and who invent perfumes that you can buy. Le Labo is one. What's his name? Whose uncle is the famous Louis Malle. So Louis Malle's nephew, also Frédéric Malle, basically has a company where he designs his own perfume. You can even go to a perfumer and talk about your personality and your hang-ups, and like going to a psychiatrist, and they will invent a perfume for you. I don't think these perfumers, these boutique perfume companies, can touch the big companies. They just can't. We're not talking about Teslas here, right? Teslas that are competing with Fords and Mercedes. No, they just can't compete. However, there is a market for it, because a lot of people who want perfume don't want the mass-produced perfumes, which are quite beautiful, still expensive, and these boutique perfumers are also not very cheap. But the point is, they want something special, something that's marginal, something that's a little edgy. There's a new, I read about this in the New York Times, there's a new type of perfume that's an anti-perfume now. Really, it's an anti-perfume. It's basically a perfume that you can't smell. And it's become popular in certain areas, in New York particularly. So, no. But I don't know why Gabrielle is not selling. I just don't know. And one thing I should point out, and this is important, when a perfume company decides to launch a perfume, first of all, the names have already been patented. So Chanel has every CH name in French you can think of. All right? But when they try to test the market, they hire a company who does research like this. They test it in Japan, they test it in New York, and they test it in France or in Germany. And that test will indicate which of 6 or 7 versions. I remember one summer when I was with my friend Jacques Poge, he had a new perfume and he had 6 different, versions of it. And he liked one, I happened to like the same one, my wife liked the same one. It's not the one they picked, because the market research showed that my nose was just not good enough. Just showed it wasn't going to be as sellable as some of the others. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much,
Oh,
Richard.
okay. Oh, can we have one more question?
We'll take one last
Okay, one last question.
Thank you.
I want to ask you about men, because I have sort of observed anecdotally that American men, who are not necessarily known as a group for being terribly romantic people and sensual people as a group, are kind of repelled by heavy scents. I think that maybe it's our Puritan heritage or whatever, but also in the workplace, and they just don't want to smell you before you enter the room or anything like that. European men maybe have a very different level of tolerance for all kinds of smells, body odors, fragrance, whatever. And I can easily see that some things do well here that don't do well in Europe. Or is it true that American women are not wearing the same kinds of scents that our grandmothers and great-grandmothers wore, like the Shalimars that are very, and even the Estee Lauder fragrances of the 50s and 60s.
Youth do.
You left it for everybody to smell when you left.
Yeah, the question is whether the new perfumes today, or the perfumes of the past, whether Americans who do not, American men, have a tendency to dislike heavy, sensuous perfumes, and possibly European or Oriental individual men would like them better. There are cultural differences between what people like in the way of smell and don't like. So, from that point of view, I really can't answer. I don't know, because it's gotten to the point now where American women who are 20, 30, and 40 don't like Shalimar, don't like Poison. And the movement now is to lighter fragrances, more floral fragrances. Gabrielle, I mean, they want the women who are the age of Kristen Stewart to buy this perfume. Women, you know, Chanel No. 5, which is a classic, it's iconic, and they've come out now with, you know, what I like to refer to as Chanel No. 5 Light, L-I-T-E. There are different versions of it. Joy now has a new version. So they're changing a little the formula to make it lighter and greener and much more popular, because you're right, those heavy scents are no longer popular. Now, whether men, you know, are responsible for that reaction, I don't know, but women themselves just don't like that kind of perfume. Okay? Thank you very much.